So for today's deep dive, we are jumping into one of the most, I think, puzzling moments in the entire Exodus story. You're right there.
Yeah.
The tension is at its absolute peak. Moses and Aaron are about to go in and confront Pharaoh. And then right at that moment, the Torah just hits the brakes. It interrupts this huge dramatic scene to give us this, I don't know, almost administrative detail. It says Moses was 80 years old and Aaron 83 years old when they spoke to Pharaoh.
hmm
And you just have to ask, why? Why then? I mean, we know Moses was strong until he was 120, so it's not about his physical ability. So why emphasize the number 80 right at this moment? It feels less like a historical fact and more like a secret code.
It is absolutely a code. And the sources we've been digging into, especially from Hasidic thought, are so clear on this. This has almost nothing to do with his physical age. It's all about his spiritual, his intellectual attainment. What the sources are telling us is that the number 80, it signifies this unique spiritual power, a level of intelligence that's required for real redemption, to actually break the limits.
Okay, so our mission today is to crack that code. We're going to unpack how Moses turning 80 wasn't just a birthday. It was him reaching this capacity to, well, transcend boundaries.
hmm
And this is a lesson that is directly applicable to you breaking through whatever is keeping you stuck in your own personal Egypt.
And to really get it, to understand the breakthrough of 80, we have to start with the number it goes beyond. 70. 70, in classical Jewish thought, represents the 7 basic spiritual attributes, the middadaf.
Right, like kindness, severity, beauty, all of those.
Exactly. And they function within the world structure. You see them everywhere, the 7 days of the week, 7 notes in a scale. They basically define the rules of the natural system.
So 70 is about working inside the system. It's like being as effective as possible, but you're still playing by the established rules.
Precisely. Which makes 80 the game changer. Because 80 represents the 8th degree. And that 8th level is Binah, understanding, or let's call it central intellect.
So because it's the 8th, it's inherently outside of the 7. It's on a different plane.
It operates above the natural law that those 7 attributes govern.
Wow. Okay, that totally reframes what Moses was up against. This wasn't just about waiting to get older. It was about ascending to a whole new level of thinking. A level where the rules of Egypt Pharaoh's power, the fact of slavery, they just didn't apply in the same way.
And this power of 80, this level of Binah, it's connected to the biblical term yevero, might, strength.
But not muscle.
Not at all. It's the spiritual strength you need to operate above nature. It's the power for paradigm-shifting nonlinear action.
The power to create miracles, not just manage reality.
Exactly. And the sources point to this being a dual power source. Redemption needed a leader with 2 things. First, he had to be the 7th generation from Abraham.
Which connects him to Shabbat, the 7th day, which is already above the 6 days of work and nature.
Right. So he's got this root connection, but he also needed the intellectual transformation. He had to reach the level of 80, the capacity of Binah.
So it's this dual engine, the deep roots, plus this abstract, transcendent understanding. That's what unlocks freedom.
And this is where it gets really fascinating, because the sources tell us not all intellect is the same. There are 2 very different types of understanding. And figuring out the difference between them, well, that's the key to using this power of 80 in your own life.
Okay, let's break that down. We're talking about Tevunah versus Binah. So let's start with Tevunah.
Tevunah is, let's call it practical intellect. It's the thinking you need for practical action. Running your business, following a recipe, planning a trip. It's our daily functional intelligence.
Okay.
And the most important point here is that Tevunah is subject to the world's boundaries. The sources say the world itself was created with Tevunah. It's the mental software the system runs on.
So Tevunah is following the GPS instructions perfectly. You're using the existing roads, the existing system to get where you need to go.
Perfect analogy. You're navigating the infrastructure. But now, contrast that with Binah, the essential intellect that Moses reached at 80. Binah is intellect in its pure, abstract form. It is completely free from the constraints of, physical application or the fragmented nature of the world. It's the ability to just contemplate truth itself.
So if Tevunah is following the GPS, Binah is stepping back and understanding the physics, the mathematics, the incredible abstract logic of the satellite network that makes it all possible.
Exactly. It's the engineer who gets the universal principles, not just the person pushing the buttons on the device.
So Tevunah helps us work within boundaries.
And Binah is the power you need to actually exit the boundary. It is the core force of the Exodus, moving from a contained reality to a free one.
That's a huge distinction. But doesn't that risk, disconnecting you?
Mm.
You're operating so far above the rules. How do you stay grounded enough to actually lead people out?
That is the critical question. And the answer is that Binah needs an anchor. The ultimate power source for breaking chains came from a level that is even higher than intellect. It comes from the early forefathers.
Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Yes, but not just as historical figures, in their deepest spiritual root, a level known as Keter, the crown.
So if Binah is this super high abstract thought, Keter is even beyond that. It's more primal.
It is. It's the simple, inherent will of the soul, your essential desire. It comes before intellect, before logic, before you calculate the how.
It's just a pure want.
It's the pure want, the absolute non-negotiable core of who you are. The sources connect this to the power of a birthday, for instance. It's this raw, essential potential.
So the power Moses was using wasn't just his own hard-won intellectual achievement at 80. It was that, but it was channeled through this much deeper, older root of the forefathers.
The simple, unwavering desire for connection that existed before all the limitations were even put in place.
Okay, so let's put it all together. For Moses, true breakthrough needed this combination. You need the gift, the raw power, from that essential root, Keter.
The desire for freedom.
And you need the focused work, the abstract contemplation of Binah of Moses at 80, to figure out how to bring that infinite power into our limited world.
You need both. The simple moot and the complex, nonlinear understanding. And the Hasidic masters, they didn't just teach this as theory, they told stories.
Right, to make it practical. And these stories really illustrate the difference between these forces. Let's start with a story about the Baal Shem Tov, which perfectly captures the power of Keter, that essential root. There's this simple man, a farmer, totally devout, but he can't read. And he feels so trapped by the structure of the prayer service.
He's stuck in Tevunah, right? He sees the practical requirement, know the words, say them in order, and he just can't do it. He feels completely locked out.
Totally. So what does he do? He just cries out. And he uses the only thing he knows, which is the Hebrew alphabet. He says, Master of the universe, I know the letters. Aleph, Bet, Gimel. Here they are. I can't put them together, but you can. You make the prayer for me.
And the Baal Shem Tov said that this prayer, this raw, essential connection that drew directly on his Keter, his simple will, it bypassed everything. It shot through all the heavens faster and higher than the most sophisticated, beautifully constructed prayer. It was pure essence.
That is the power of just accessing your core self without all the rules and calculations. That's Keter.
Exactly. Now let's look at the difference between the two intellects, Tevunah and Binah, with a story from the Maggid of Mezrich. It's a simple scene. Two people looking at a hay cart in a market.
Same cart, two different ways of seeing. The first person looks at the hay, and their mind immediately goes to Tevunah, the practical intellect.
Correct. That person is thinking, okay, how much does this cost? Is it enough for my horses? What's the going rate? His whole mind is inside the box of worldly needs. Economics, survival.
He's operating efficiently within the system.
But the second person sees the exact same hay cart, and they engage their Binah.
And what do they think?
They think, wow, what an incredible wonder. That spiritual energy becomes a physical plant, which is then going to become energy for another living creature. Look at the divine wisdom in that cycle.
It's the same object, but one person uses it to think about limits and costs, and the other uses it as a springboard to think about the infinite.
That is the difference. One mind is contained by boundaries. The other uses the physical world to transcend them.
And this brings us to a more modern take on the power of 80. A story about a businessman. He's almost 80. And he tells his rabbi he's too old. He feels his time has passed. He can't start that big project he always dreamed of.
He's operating completely from Tevunah. He's calculating his remaining years, his energy, the practical limits. For him, 80 is the finish line.
But the rabbi just flips the script. He quotes the verse we started with. 80 is Lejavora. It's for strength.
And he explains to him, you've done the 70 years. You've done the work of the worldly attributes. Now you've reached Binah. Now you have the real spiritual power to create something that lasts.
And he urged him to start this huge educational institution, which he did.
Because 80 isn't the end. It's the beginning of your most powerful work. It is the breakthrough.
So every day, you face your own Egypt. We all do. Those fears, those habits, the financial constraints, whatever boundaries make you feel like you're living under Pharaoh's rules.
And the practical lesson for Moses is that to get free, you have to combine these two powers. Just trying harder with practical thinking with Tevunah, that doesn't break you out of jail. It just makes you a more efficient prisoner.
So how do we actually apply this? What are the steps?
Okay, Application step 1 is anchoring in Keter. When you feel paralyzed by the practical details, just stop. Step out of the calculation. Remember your simple, essential root. Your soul is a piece of the infinite. It is not defined by this problem. Connect to that pure, simple desire for freedom, like the man with the Aleph bet.
That's the fuel, the raw will to be free.
Then comes application step 2, the action of Binah. Before you dive into the practical work, before you tackle the challenge, take a moment. A moment for deep, abstract contemplation. Don't just think about the steps or the outcome. Ask yourself, what is the essential divine truth of this goal? What is the intrinsic value here, beyond the result?
So for a business person, before negotiation, they don't just think about the profit margin. They take a second to contemplate the abstract truth of, say, honest exchange or creating value.
Precisely. You ground the practical act in an abstract, transcendent truth. That moment, that little shift into abstract thought, connects you to the strength of 80. It gives you the power to act from a place above the limitations you're seeing. It lets you walk out of your Egypt, just like Moses walked out of his.
So the sources are teaching that this level of Binah, the ability to connect to abstract truth to break our limits, is actually more real than the physical world we see. So if real freedom requires this kind of abstract thinking, what deep, fundamental, spiritual value have you been overlooking today because you were just too busy focusing on the practical result?